Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Business Insider Series. My name is Chris Robert, and I'm serving as the chair of the management department here in the Trulaske College of Business. This webinar-based series is designed to highlight the work of experts who are addressing important contemporary business issues. The title of today's webinar is Mindset Matters for Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. I think imposter syndrome is such an important topic for everybody to understand, but particularly our graduates who are often asked to take on highly responsible roles very early in their careers and who may not always feel that they are ready or that they deserve them. A couple of notes. If you are a student who is seeking EDGE points, the EDGE office will give you credit for attendance based on the Zoom record of attendees and the verification of the time you were logged on. There is no QR code. There is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, but please don't direct questions about EDGE points through that or the chat function. If you have questions for EDGE, please email them at edge@missouri.edu. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Denise Mills is co-founder and managing partner of the LeaderFuel Center, which provides leadership development training, strategic planning, business consulting, and executive coaching. Denise's primary focus is working with leadership teams, providing tools for more effective leadership, and to develop a growth mindset throughout the entire organization. Denise facilitates the Central Exchange Emerging Leaders, which has a record 163 women in the program this year. Her work has taken her to underserved countries around the globe, including Ukraine, India, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, and many more. Denise is the recipient of numerous awards, including Kansas City Business Journal's Women Who Mean Business, 25 Under 25, and twice being named one of the most 50 influential women in Kansas City. Highly active in the community, Denise founded a gang intervention program in Kansas City, Kansas, and serves on the board of directors for the Catholic Education Foundation, Gateway of Hope, and Second Wind Ministries. And our second presenter is Joel Andrus. Joel Andrus is an assistant professor of management in the management department in the Robert J. Trulaske Senior College of Business. His research focuses on topics that include strategic leadership, corporate governance, and entrepreneurship. His work has been published in top journals such as the Academy of Management Journal, Strategic Management Journal, and the Journal of Management, as well as the Academy of Management Annals. His working papers include topics such as gender equity in crowdfunding and innovation, executive labor markets, and sustainable entrepreneurship. He and his wife, Brenda, are co-owners of Sips Sodas in Columbia, Missouri, which they founded in 2023 as a way to help their 6 children experience business principles. If we were live and in person, I'd ask you to give Denise and Joel a round of applause. But in this format, I'll just say welcome and thank you both for being with us today. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Wow, what an introduction. Joel, it's just really an honor to be working with you on this presentation, but also it's an honor to be with all of you today. This is a very important topic of imposter syndrome, and we have a lot to share with you, some exciting information. So I'm going to start us off by just saying that we have 3 key objectives. Our first objective is to be able to help you understand what imposter syndrome is and some of the symptoms of what imposter syndrome is. You may or may not have heard of this term before. The second thing we want to do is have you reflect on some of your own social conditionings and how and why you are the way you are. So we have some exciting activities there. And then the third thing is to provide you with some tools to help build your confidence, both in a professional setting, but also in a social setting as well. So here we go. These are 4 leaders that I'm sure that you recognize. What do you think they all have in common? Obviously, they're famous. We know their companies. We know about Facebook. We know Starbucks is a global brand as well. Interestingly, all four of these individuals have publicly shared that they suffer with imposter syndrome. So what exactly does that mean? Here's a definition. It's pretty academic, but here's a definition. And I would say overall, what imposter syndrome is this persistent feeling of self-doubt, like you don't belong in the room. Everybody else is smarter than you. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. And that you don't necessarily have something to offer. What's interesting is now in the medical field, you'll notice in the second definition, which came from the National Library of Medicine, that they are now identifying imposter syndrome as a phenomena. And all that simply means is that they recognize that it exists and that it is now contributing to high levels of anxiety and in some cases, even depression for individuals. So what exactly is it? Here's just another way to depict what imposter syndrome is. If you're a student and you walked into a class, do you feel like everybody knows more than you know from the get-go? And for those of you who are alumni joining us, if you have walked into a business meeting or a new project and you feel like everyone else knows more than you know, and you get that uncomfortable feeling of self-doubt, that is imposter syndrome. So here's what's going on in your head. There's a voice, and this is the mindset matters piece. This is the voice in your head that is telling you that you don't belong, that you're a fraud in a way, or an imposter. Interestingly, true imposters, don't have this voice in their heads. So if people who are really faking it don't have this voice. But here's the thing, it's a persistent voice, so it just takes off and it just ruminates in your head. And it makes you feel like you don't belong. So again, you probably have experienced this in some way. We're going to walk through several different personas of the imposter. And as you're listening, what I'd like for you to do is just pay attention to each of these different personas, and then we're going to have a poll. The personas are here at the bottom. We'll review them, so don't worry about writing them down. But what we'd like to know when we're finished here is which of these personas, and maybe all of them, have you experienced, or do you just feel like you relate to? So Joel, I'm going to bring you in on this because I want to go through each of these and give them some examples so they know what we're talking about. So the first one is that persona of the perfectionist. So this is the person who has anxiety about how things are being done. They fear the mistakes. In fact, I'm not going to go through all these, but I'm going to give you an example. You can read the screen. Here's my own example. After a presentation like this, we can have 100 surveys, feedback surveys, and let's say 99 out of 100 give us 5-star rating, 5 out of 5, which is the highest rating. But one of them, one person out of 100, gives us a 4-star rating. I'll start questioning, oh my gosh, wasn't it very good? How did I miss that? And suddenly there's this voice in my head that is trying to tell me that I didn't do a good job. That's just an example of the perfectionist in our heads that make us feel like everything has to be perfect 100% of the time. So Joel, I'm bringing you in on this. Is that something you can relate to?
Absolutely, Denise. I was just thinking about my experience recently. I'm coaching my son's soccer team. I didn't grow up playing soccer, so I'm still very much learning, and I am making mistakes as we go. I worry a lot though about the impact I have on the game and on these kids. But what I forget though, oftentimes, is the reality is I was the only parent that was willing to step up and help coach. And, instead of letting myself go down that road of like, oh my gosh, we made a mistake in a game, or I should have done this, just giving myself some grace and remembering that I am actually doing the best I can, and we're having a good time.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. So here's the second one. This is the expert. And the expert is certainly something I can relate to. I am a professional facilitator, basically. I'm not necessarily expected, like, for example, if I walk into the room of an engineering firm, I'm not expected to know about engineering. I'm there for a different purpose. I'm there to help their leaders be better leaders. I'm there to give an outside perspective to strategy, or to facilitate a conversation that if an outsider wasn't in the room, they would start swirling and maybe digging themselves into a hole in their conversations. So that's my role. But I can sometimes start to doubt my ability to help someone who has an area of expertise that I don't have. And yet they called me into the room for a purpose, for a particular reason. So that's a lot of undue pressure that's not necessary, but it creeps into my head almost every engagement that I have, which for me is on a daily basis. Joel, do you have an example of an expert? You are an expert in several areas.
So I was just thinking about, I mean, even this this session, I've been stewing all morning about, what is it going to be good enough? Are we going to actually come across as the experts? When in reality, the important thing is just having the conversation and helping people become more aware of this so that they can start to learn themselves. I was telling my wife earlier, I'm really, really grateful to have a teammate that is an expert in areas that maybe I'm not, right? And I think this is one of the important things we'd like you to remember from this is like learning to rely on others, to not expect yourself to be able to do everything, to be the expert in all areas, but be very comfortable in the areas that you are expert in and let others come in and supplement those areas that maybe you're not the expert in.
Yeah, that's good advice. And for me, what helps me, especially even in presentations like this, is to remind myself that I'm just here to help. I'm not here to necessarily be the expert about all areas of whatever the topic is. But when I remind myself I'm here to help, that calms me down when I feel like I need to walk in and know more than everyone else in the room. You all that are on this call have different experiences that hopefully as we're talking, you can relate to. But these different experiences are different than Joel and mine. And that's what we really want you to do is really connect with some of these different personas. So this third one is the natural genius. This one I don't relate to as well. The first two I relate to very easily, but this is not one that I necessarily have this expectation of. But the natural genius has this unrealistic expectation that they are to be the smartest person in the room naturally, that they are just supposed to know everything. And because they're so natural at it, they can do it faster and better than everyone else. It's a lot of pressure, but that's what the definition of a natural genius is.
A better name for that, Denise, might be the Joel Andrus persona. This is one that is 100% me. I have extremely high expectations for myself and others around me. And those expectations oftentimes, if not kept in check, can become really unhealthy. The times when I have failed, and I have failed spectacularly a few times in my life. Even in my education, a lot of times people think, oh, you have a PhD, you must have been like really good at school. That was true in elementary. And then it was less true as I went up the ladder, I guess, so to speak. I ended up failing my comprehensive exams in my PhD program. So comprehensive exams are after 2 years of coursework, they give you this big multi-day exam. And if you don't pass, most times they show you out the door and say, there's probably better things for you somewhere else. I was the only one in my group that didn't pass. And in the last few years, I was the only one that hadn't passed. That was extraordinarily difficult for me. And I put a lot of stress on myself that wasn't necessarily required. It became a very unhealthy thing for me. For about 6 months, and I had to go back to work and study again, and ended up passing and have done well since then. But like these times when I do fail or having these expectations, again, just not giving myself the grace and realizing that I'm carrying a load that other people aren't. Certainly my cohort members and the other PhD students, we all came from very different backgrounds, very different countries, actually. We all just had to figure out how to give each other grace. So for whatever that's worth.
Joel, I'm sure a lot of the students can relate to that. And I know when I was helping my own children through school, when we would just talk about a subject matter, whatever the subject was, they could explain it. They knew the information. But when it came to the test taking, they had this test anxiety that just almost paralyzed them, and the knowledge wouldn't come through. And that's some of what you're describing. It's not that you didn't know, it's just the anxiety of the test and the pressure can affect us in such a way that we need to learn to relax and just sort of take those deep breaths, and recognize, like, we know this stuff. The test itself shouldn't be a measure of whether or not we know it.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too, Denise, to remember that, when we fail, I actually, as I'm getting older, I have a much greater appreciation for those experiences. It's the times that I have failed, or the times that I maybe haven't lived up to my own expectations or others, that actually have allowed me some really substantial opportunities to help other people. So even in my own work now as a teacher, I test differently now because I failed my comprehensive exams, and I'm very much aware of what you were just talking about. And I try and minimize that as much as I can on my students, which hopefully they appreciate.
I was just going to say how wonderful that is for your students that you have that awareness, because again, not all of us take tests or are allowed. It's not as easy for us to recall that information in a pressure felt system or environment.
Yeah.
So you're very fortunate or your students are very fortunate that they have you, Joel. So here's the fourth one, is the soloist. Now this one I can absolutely relate to. This is probably my primary persona, which I'm an Iowa farm girl. And as a farmer, you really, it's ingrained in you to be self-sufficient, to figure things out, to handle things on your own. You can't always depend on help around you. And I was conditioned to believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And that's just really stuck in my head. So here's how it plays out, Joel, which you'll kind of laugh at this, but I'm so self-sufficient that I might be carrying 3 cases of water and walk up to a door, and somebody will come up and go, "Hey, can I get the door for you?" And I'm like, no, I got it. Like, no, the answer is yes, please get the door for me. I need a 4th hand and a 5th hand. But it's hard for me to accept help when it's obvious that it would benefit me. And I've really had to work to overcome that. I think I'm an entrepreneur. I run a company. I've run several companies, but all my own companies over the years. And I think being an entrepreneur is, there's good and bad. As a soloist, you're responsible for other people's incomes and their families, and just having enough revenue in any company is a lot of pressure. And yet it wasn't healthy in a company for me to take all that on myself. I needed to depend on my leadership team to pick up pieces of the organization, because kind of going back to the expert, I couldn't be an expert in all areas. We needed the diversity of our skill set to come together in a strong way to be a solid team to build a self-sustaining business. So this one stings a little for me.
It's interesting that you say that. I want to just take a minute and point out, Denise, like there are actually some really good parts of these personas that can be really healthy and I think are actually quite necessary for our own lives. You know, whether it's a good work ethic, whether it is being somewhat independent and being able to function on your own, whether it's being able to, you know, that perfectionist in you that wants to do a good job, like those can be really good things. But the important thing is, and the important message I think for today is, it's also really important to learn to put boundaries around those feelings or those personas so that they don't get out of hand and they don't go too far to where it actually puts a lot of undue stress and pressure on you that can become a very negative influence on your life.
Yeah, I call that the Goldilocks principle. And you know, and we don't want to create labels and put labels on those of you who are listening today, but helping us sort of separate these out and understanding the different nuances help. But the Goldilocks principle is just there's a just right aspect of each one of these, but there's also the too much and the too little and the too little. And if I could go back like to the expert, for example, if I have too little of the expert in me, that when I'm in the room, I may not be asking pertinent questions because I don't believe that I have the expertise to ask the question. I think it's a dumb question. So I'll kind of hold myself back. The other side of the expert is me walking into a room like the too much of, and I'm overcompensating for feeling like I don't belong. So now I'm spewing all of my credentials. Well, I've done this and I've done that, so therefore I deserve to be in the room. And that could come across very off-putting. It's not intentional, it's just how we tend to overcompensate or undercompensate for this feeling of being an imposter.
Yeah, absolutely, Denise. One of the things I'd like to just maybe spend a little bit of time on is like oftentimes when we hear about imposter syndrome, we often discuss it as something that's in our own heads and it's a result of our own selves. And that's absolutely not true. I want to talk for a minute about culture and this idea of social conditioning that you mentioned at the very beginning. Culture is something that has a tremendous impact on just on our lives, whether we admit it or not. I want you to take a minute and have you look at these pictures coming up, if that's all right.
And Joel, before you do that, can we do this quick poll? We'll go through this one
sorry.
and do the fifth persona. But I'd love to do a poll. But what you're describing is so true. Each one of these is something that we have been socially conditioned to believe about ourselves. It's kind of like what's expected of us in our families. So look at number 5. Number 5 here is this workaholic superhuman. And again, this is another one that's been ingrained in me. And it's through my family. It's like, this is what we're expected. This is what's okay and not okay in our family. And one of the things is, and you'll kind of laugh about this, but we have been told from the time we were little that taking a nap is lazy. Like napping is a lazy thing. Or not doing 10 things at once is lazy. So we have this kind of lazy thing that has been ingrained in us. And I remember, like, if even we act as if we're tired, we were teased, right? And we needed to show up in a bigger way than what was probably human. That's why it's called superhuman, right? But we were conditioned to show up in a way to just help everyone, be there for everyone, which puts us in a situation of not feeling like you can please anyone, even though, you know, you feel expected to. But this sort of self-sacrifice and martyr feeling, like I can't even express my own needs because it's not okay to say I'm exhausted and I need a break. It's something that from our family perspective has been ingrained in us. But I'm going to put the poll up. So I believe I have to stop sharing in order to pull the poll up. Maybe not. Let me see. So I'm going to put a poll up. Can you see that? You see that poll? Here it goes. Yes, you can, because we can see the numbers coming in. Joel, can you see that?
Yeah.
Thank you for participating. We appreciate this. It's wonderful to have each other to banter with, but we can see how you're relating to what we're talking about. Letting these numbers come in. I'll give you about maybe 20 more seconds. And then I'll close this poll. When I close a poll, I believe the results will pop up online. And again, feel free to check all that you relate to. It looks like the perfectionist. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Going to close it. And here's the results. Look at that. Perfectionist is out in the lead. Isn't that interesting? And you can still see on screen that definition of perfectionist, what, fearing making a mistake. I tell people all the time, like, just sort of touch yourself. You're human. None of us are expected to be perfect all the time. And that is just a lot of pressure. But you can see the expert, the natural genius, even the soloist, and the superhuman are just sort of neck and neck with how we feel about each of these personas. So I think they're getting it, Joel. Now let's talk about that social conditioning, because that social conditioning is such an important part of all of this.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say it really underlies the that perfectionist idea of, we define perfection by essentially the way that we're socially conditioned. And I think it is really important to remember that we are impacted, the way we view ourselves is very much impacted by the world around us. So it could be the family that you grew up in. It could be religion. It could be the educational experience. It could be, the area you grew up in, what region of the United States, or even the state of Missouri. There's substantial differences even within a very small geographic area. It could be like race or ethnicity, and the backgrounds that shape who we are and how we appear to people. I want to take a minute and just have you think for a bit, like, when you go to a Mizzou football game, like, what does a tailgate look like? And culture shapes our perception. The marketing that we see all the time shapes our perception of what a good tailgate needs to include. And the reality is most of the time, if we don't live up to that idea in our head, we feel like we've let people down. We feel like we're less than maybe what we were anyway. Instead of just appreciating the fact that we tried. We did something to get people together, and however it turned out, just being grateful for the opportunity to spend time with other people. But if we get so distracted by having that perfect tailgate or that perfect educational experience, it tends to really weigh on us. And that oftentimes is where it turns very unhealthy. So I want to just share an example from my own life of how this happened. Or my sister, actually, in our home, education was super highly prioritized. My sister was the only one of 7 kids to not get her college degree. She played a couple years of basketball in college, but ended up meeting someone that was going off to medical school. So she decided to drop out and move to be with her husband. For the last several decades, she has felt like she was essentially the black sheep of the family. Like, she felt like she was less than her other siblings simply because she was the only one not to get her degree. And this idea of when we don't fit in that cultural or that socially conditioned box, we feel that we don't belong. We feel like imposters, and that can be really unhealthy. So much so that 25 years later, she went back to school despite not needing a college degree. She went back to school and finished her college degree simply so that my dad could say that all of his kids got a college degree. And I don't think my dad was putting pressure on her at that point, but she put a lot of pressure on herself just to not be the standout. In a similar way, if if you think about what the perfect American home looks like, I just Googled the perfect American home, and these are the images that showed up, and even to the proverbial, white picket fence down there at the bottom. But when we think about what, success or what our lives should be like, or what maybe they will be like down the road, oftentimes we have things like these expectations that we live in a nice big house, that we have the perfect lawn, that we have a nice car, we're able to travel. And those can all be really good things, but if taken too far, a lot of people put unnecessary stress on their lives that has a big negative impact on them. Even, in my own neighborhood, I find it really interesting how much time and money spend on just their yard. I think grass is about the most successful marketing campaign out there. Companies spent decades and decades telling us that we needed these nice green lawns in order to be seen as like fitting in. The reality is those lawns take a lot of time, they take a lot of money, and environmentally, we're putting a lot of pollution into the environment just through the fertilizers that we use. We're using drinking water, which is fairly scarce in many parts of the world, including the US. I grew up in an area that had 7 inches of rainfall a year, and still you see, almost every home has this nice green lawn. And the reality is why are we doing that to ourselves? It doesn't make any sense. Similarly, we could talk about like a wedding. For those of you who aren't married, think about what your ideal wedding looks like. I talked to my class about this a few weeks ago, and they came up with a list of about 20 things. And in one of the classes, we spent almost 15 minutes talking about what the ideal wedding looked like before someone brought up the fact that, well, wait a minute, all you really need to have a wedding is your partner and someone with the authority to marry you. Like, you don't need all of these other things. And the reality is so much in our lives, culture around us tells us that we do need all of those things to have that perfect wedding. When for most of the world, and for most of time, even in America, these things just were never possible. Even if I look at like my grandparents' home and where they were raised in, lots of kids in like a 1,000 square foot home. And if I were put into that situation, I'm not sure me or maybe my kids would have survived. Like, my expectation is very, very different than what expectations were even just, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And understanding that these cultural expectations have a big impact on us is something that I would absolutely want you to take away from this presentation.
Joel, excuse me for interrupting. We have an interesting question that I'm interested in your perspective on, which is of these different areas of social conditioning. You mentioned family, religion, education, like where we live, so national or regional. And then we didn't really touch much on race and ethnicity, but of course that contributes as well. Are any of these more significant than another? The question is, where do you see social conditioning most?
That's an amazing question. I would say, like the answer to most questions is that it depends. I think it's going to depend a lot on the culture around you. If you grow up in a home that really values, education or maybe religion, those things tend to define your ideas of what success looks like. Race or ethnicity become, I think, much more important when maybe you're a minority in an area. So like I find when I've traveled to other parts of the country or even the world, when I'm maybe the only American or maybe the only white man in a room, that tends to really stand out a lot in our minds, and we feel very much out of place. I actually have a friend from when we were in Texas. He recently went to a funeral of a really good friend, and he was the only white person in the room. And he just talked about how he's a really funny guy. It didn't bother him, but he just said it was really interesting, the feelings that came in when he realized, I'm very, very different than everyone else in this room. And the reality is all of those people in that room were there to celebrate someone's life. And, these things matter more or less depending on what's around you. I don't know if that makes sense or not, or if you have any thoughts, Denise.
I like you, it's one of those depends kinds of answers. However, I think because family is so important and it kind of ties a lot of these other components in, and that's our early conditioning. I mean, we early on, even from in today's gender identity conversation, from the moment we're born, we are treated as a boy or as a girl, that it's okay as a boy to do this, but it's not okay as a girl to do that. If I've got two of my grandsons wrestling in the living room, it's kind of like boys will be boys. But if we had two girls wrestling in the living room right away, there's a tone about, oh no, that's not okay. That's not how we act. And so children early on, and I think this is something that parents need to be mindful of, is early on, we're giving our kids the tone in our voice, or they're overhearing conversations, which fills them in or clues them to what is okay and not okay in our lives.
Yeah, that's a great example, Denise. And I would just add, the tone is important to have. Like in your home, as you're raising kids, as you interact with others, as I'm coaching my son's soccer team, having a culture that sets appropriate and meaningful expectations, that's really important, and it helps us become a better team or a better family. It's just really important to understand that so often these cultural influences that are not necessarily healthy they're really insidious in terms of the way they can creep in and affect the way we live our lives and the way we perceive ourselves.
Yeah, here's another great example that you have of that.
All right, so I just want to take a minute. What stands out to you in this paper, or in this picture? We oftentimes when we watch the news or when we look on social media, I like sports. I really enjoy, especially like high quality sports casting, people that understand the game well. For example, like Tony Romo comes to mind, and I love listening to him during a football game because he just provides so many insights. The woman in this picture with pink hair, I've never seen.
I hardly noticed that it was pink. For a moment, I hardly noticed that.
You're better than I am. That's immediately what drew my eye. She's actually an amazing sportscaster, but the fact that she has pink hair really makes her stand out, right? And it violates so many cultural norms, especially within like the sports. If you think about ESPN newscasters, if they are a woman, there's a very specific type of woman that they hire as their sportscasters. And Hannah doesn't necessarily fit that just simply by virtue of the color of her hair. We focus more on her hair than maybe we do her qualifications and her expertise. And so I just wanted to point out that these things are all around us as one example.
I think it's interesting, Joel, because that pink hair just jumps off the page, right? And it's a stereotype we have. It's a belief. I mean, so much of this is a belief, whether it's a do or undue belief that is not the way things are supposed to be. Yeah. Right. And we can judge. I mean, if my whole family is all about different colored hair and wild, fun colors, then I wouldn't even think that there's anything unique about that. But if I'm in a family where that was not socially acceptable, back to the social conditioning, right away I'm judging. And I think that's the key here, is that we are such a judgmental society versus just allowing people to bring their own unique self into the room and to be fully authentic. For whatever reason, we're getting uncomfortable with that as a culture collectively. Yeah. And I think that's a shame, because the more diversity around me, the more I grow, the more my awarenesses shift, the better person that I am, recognizing that our differences have value, and our differences cut through the blind spots that we have.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to the example of my sister, like, again, it wasn't my parents pressuring my sister to go back and get her degree, right? It doesn't, even if it's not really promoted, right? My parents were totally fine with who she is and very proud of her for what she's accomplished in her life. But she still felt this pressure, right? Just simply by virtue of standing out in a way that none of us ever talk about or think about, really, still was very important to her to change that. Yeah, yeah, that imposter syndrome in all of our lives is very, very good at getting into our head. So what I want to ask each of you to do is just take a minute, and if you have, maybe some paper or your phone in front of you, think about how culture influences what you do and how you feel. Maybe think of the way that culture has influenced expectations of what your life should be like. And then I want you to consider, like, are those expectations actually helpful? Again, in some ways they might be very helpful, and I think they are necessary, but in what ways have they maybe been taken too far? And that's where I want you to start to think about how you can put boundaries or restrictions around those expectations so that you use them for the good that they provide, but then don't let them become a negative influence in your life.
These are great questions. Another way to think about it when I see these questions is, for those of you that, whether you're married or not married, whether you have a long-standing relationship or not, there was that first time that you brought that partner into your family, into a family event of some kind. And some of the answers to some of these questions are, what did I give my now husband a heads up for when he came into our family environment? And for me, back to our self-sufficiency and that, like what lazy is or isn't, I told my husband early on, I said, when the event is over, we have to be the last people to leave. No matter what, we have to be the last people to leave the big family event. And he's like, why? When it's over, we just leave. And I'm like, no. We stay to help up. We put chairs away. We clean up the kitchen. We wipe off the tables. We don't walk out until everyone walks out together. That's just the way that it is. And he didn't understand that at all, but it made such a difference in how he was accepted early on in our family. It's like, oh, look at him. He's pitching in right away to help. And suddenly he was accepted. If we would have left early, there would have been other stories made up about him, which weren't fair. Maybe we had another engagement of some kind. But that's how cultural influences make us feel guilty about something that we shouldn't necessarily feel guilty about. So I'm going to walk us through some tools, because we've been talking a lot about what it is and how social conditioning has impacted us from an imposter-like feeling. But let's go through some tools. So the first tool is to stop comparing yourself to others. And in today's world of social media, it seems like everybody has an opinion about no matter what we say or how we look or how we're dressed or whatever the case may be. And I have learned, and it has taken some personal work, but I have learned to tell myself that I bring a unique perspective, even if the person right next to me is very, very, very similar. But I still have a unique upbringing. They didn't walk in my shoes. So if we can recognize and value our uniqueness, especially in business and especially in any group project at school, that the uniqueness of our diversity adds to better decisions and ultimately a better outcome. So it's all those unique perspectives that can make things better, but that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So number one is stop comparing yourself to others. The second one is we have all had past successes. I have, Joel, what I call my Atta Girls. And what those are is my Atta Girls is literally a list. And I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna come up on screen just to show, like, here's an example of my Atta Girls, right? It's literally a card that I have that has a list of things I'm proud of. And so why does that matter? What it does for me, now these are for me, you notice I flashed them up pretty quickly. This is for me to remind myself that I'm good at what I do when that voice of self-doubt grabs hold of me. So I'll give you a real practical example. Imagine this scenario. Imagine that any of you are interviewing for a job, right? You're sitting in a reception area of a company and you're about to interview for a job. And someone walks from the interior office door through the reception area past you and out the building, okay? And in a split second, you size that person up, right? This kind of that goes back to number one about the comparison. But right away, what we do is we look at that person and we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, that's my competition, right? And then we can have one of two thoughts. The first thought might be, oh my gosh, that's my competition. I might as well just give up right now. Now, I don't know anything about that person, but I immediately go to the negative and tell myself a story that if that's my competition, obviously they're better than I am by nothing more than them walking past me and how they walked, their stride. Now, I can also have the thought of, oh, that's my competition. I got this. And I have confidence, like, no problem, I got this, right? What my Atta girls do for me is in that moment of self-doubt, I literally have these cards in my purse, in my visor of my car, in the center console of my car, with all sorts of lists of things over the years that I'm proud of, because I'm not going to remember when that voice of self-doubt grabs hold of me. But in that moment, I can use this tool and pull one out of my bag and just reflect on some things that I've done that have turned out very, very well. I had this wonderful call yesterday, Joel, which is one of my new Atta girls. Yesterday, I got a call from a Fortune 500 CEO who retired 2 months ago, and he ran a large engineering company. I coached him maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We've had some interactions socially since, but 7 or 8 years ago, I worked with him and his company. And he called me yesterday to tell me, Denise, you were a significant component of my success because you came into my life at a particularly difficult time. And, you know, in that moment, now imagine I'm remembering that in the moment that person walks through that reception area past me. And I think about that story, that call, and I sit up a little straighter and I'm like, wow, if I can do that and make that impact, whatever I'm about to interview for, I got this. Right? It's taking a past success. And the other thing, the key word here is it's evidence. It's evidence of past success. So it's not me making up a story. These are things on my Atta girls that actually happened. So all of you listening, if there was a homework assignment I would have for you, it would be to start a list of Atta girls or Atta boys and just keep adding to it. Every time someone gives you a compliment, every time something goes well, just keep adding to it because it will make a difference in your confidence, which leads to managing that voice in your head and reframing the thoughts, right? That person walking through that reception area, again, I'm making up a story, but I can also tell myself I'm here for a reason and I can learn new things. I may not know everything that's in that job description, but I can figure it out. And if I have confidence in myself to figure out new things, then I'm going to interview very well. But if I go in with that feeling of having to be the expert, well, of course, I'm going to stumble because no one can know everything about whatever it is. And often what I tell people is I tell them, if you're interviewing and you already know everything, when you actually step into that job that first day, you're going to be bored early on because there's nothing to grow into. So managing that voice in your head is so important. Acknowledging the voice in your head, validating it. Yes, I'm nervous about this, but I'm nervous because it's important. So my stomach might be kind of nervous about a presentation, but I can say, I'm nervous and I can't do this. I'm going to throw up. I'm sick to my stomach. Or I can say, that's a healthy energy. And it's good that I'm a little bit nervous about this because it's important. And then at some point, I need to just let the self-doubt go. That's not an easy thing to do. And replacing it is by far easier. And then the last one I'll mention is seeking out a mentor, having somebody for outside with an outside perspective. I'm amazed when I'm coaching individuals, or I would say, as importantly, I'll have a one-time random conversation at a cocktail party. And someone will mention something and I will just simply affirm them. I'll just simply say, wow, Joel, you seem like you know a lot about this and how fortunate. I can tell in your mannerisms early on that your students are very fortunate to have you in their lives as a mentor. And sometimes, I mean, I'm a total stranger, right? We met for the first time. And sometimes people will all of a sudden stand up taller and they'll say, really, you think so? And it just like fills their bucket in the moment. And two things, I'm glad that I could be there to encourage them, but it makes me sad to realize how desperate people are to have someone like a mentor lift them up and see something in themselves, which by the way is the definition of a mentor, see something in others that they can't see in themselves. So I just think this is such an important list. Here they are again, so that you can make note of them. And hopefully any one of these tools put into a practical use will help silence that imposter in your head. Particularly for me, it's a combination of really 1, 2, and 3. But again, that outside perspective and mentor is increasingly invaluable. Notice who's around you. Are the people around you more negative than positive? And if you've got a lot of people around you that are negative, you might want to shift your social circle, because that negativity can start to swirl in your head. And once it gets in there, it's hard without help to release it and just let it go. So Joel, any thoughts about these? We're going to open this up for questions here in a minute.
No, I think just for the sake of time, I'd rather allow people to ask questions if they'd like to, but this is all wonderful, wonderful material, Denise. Thank you.
So Joel, you had a story, and before we wrap, and for those of you who have questions, please go ahead. You've got a question tool that you can put questions in there for us. We are happy to address them. And also in the last slide will be Joel and my email addresses. If you have other questions that you don't feel comfortable asking us in this group setting, we're happy to help you and happy to address it. But Joel, I have kind of my own dirty little secret when it comes to an imposter syndrome. I was invited by the University of Missouri to give your commencement address back in 2018. Probably one of the biggest honors in my life. I mean, the biggest honors in my life. And yet it scared me to death. I don't think I was ever so nervous as I was nervous walking up on that stage in full cap and gown. And the reason that it's just such a highlight of my life, it's on my Atta Girls. I've got this photo behind me on my credenza behind me. The reason for this is because I got this wonderful invitation at that time from the dean, and 3 times I tried to talk him out of it, like, no, no, no. You know, so I got an email from him saying, Denise, we'd like to invite you to be our commencement speaker. And I panicked. I panicked. I'm like, no, no, no. So I sent him a message back and I said, I'm sure that you have others that are by far more distinguished than I am that could give this commencement address. And he was like, nope. He came right back. I mean, I was like saying no, and immediately I got a response. And he said, no, no, we want you. And then I was like, oh. And he used the word alumni. He thought I was an alumni because my husband is, and I've been to several events, and I'm always in Mizzou attire. And so he was like, you're such a distinguished alumni. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. So I said, well, just so you know, I'm not an alum. So again, I'm sure there's other people that are more deserving. And he came back with, no, that's okay. That's fine. We don't care. We want you. And I'm like, oh. And so here was the 3rd time. I had to divulge my dirty little secret, which is I don't have a college degree. And most people are surprised to learn that. But I've worked with 70 different governments across the world with the highest ranking government officials. No one's ever asked me what my degree is in. I work with Fortune 100, 200, 500 companies. No one has ever asked me because I've always been referred in. But I had to tell the dean, like, I'm sorry, but I don't have a college degree. I cannot give this commencement speech. And again, he came back and he said, no, we want you. And what that did for me, such a gift. But what he did for me is he gave me the gift of putting this on my Atta Girl card to say it doesn't matter. This dirty little secret that I carried around for years, because at the time that I could have gone to college, my dad passed away 3 weeks prior to my high school graduation. the timing was just off. And so I couldn't work full time, which my family needed me to do, farm full time, which my mom needed help doing, and go to college. But yet, like your sister, it was very difficult to deal with. So we all have these stories, right? We all have these stories, and we have this fear that is unwarranted, and yet it sticks with us.
A fantastic story, Denise. Thank you for sharing that.
So again, our question and answers are open. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Or maybe, Joel, we just did such a great job, we don't have questions. So I have one that just popped in. I'll just read it. When you are entering a scenario where you are less experienced and skilled than others that you are competing against, how do you stay confident that you will succeed? That's a great question. Very insightful, great question. So I'll start off with the tools. This isn't but this is my life 98% of the time, is I'm walking into a situation where I'm less experienced and less skilled. I'm differently experienced and differently skilled. And that is how I don't go in with the overestimation of, or an over expectation of what I need to be in this scenario. I go in with, I'm here to contribute and not necessarily to solve.
Absolutely, Denise. I was thinking about, as I was walking up the stairs to my office this morning, I have to go up several flights. I think it's really important to remember that it's okay to not maybe be your best, right? Like, we're all very much a work in progress. Just like those flights of stairs, I can't jump from the bottom floor to the top floor of Cornell Hall. It's impossible for a human being. But what I can do is take one step at a time. And I think just as you're working and competing with others, there may be times when, frankly, you aren't good enough, right? Like, just like me in my comprehensive exam, I legitimately failed that exam. But also, don't be too hard on yourself. Like, own it, go back to work, and like, one day at a time, one step at a time. If you continue to work at it, if you continue to put the people around you that you need to follow these steps that Denise has talked about, I really do believe that you can get where you want to go in almost all cases.
So I see we're really close to time. I'm going to answer this last quick question, which is, what is your advice if a supervisor exhibits any or some of the imposter syndromes and it's negatively impacting the team? Right, that's a great question. Hopefully, I think in order to address that with the supervisor, I'm going to make the assumption that you have a good relationship with the supervisor. Then I would pull them aside, and here's the conversation I would have. The conversation I would have is, so Joel, I'm going to use you. So Joel, in that meeting, I noticed this, that you said this, and you may or may not realize that that is negatively impacting our department in this way. So the first thing I would do is create self-awareness with that supervisor and help them to see it in a way, not to judge them, but just to help them see that it's negatively impacting the team. And sometimes just that safe conversation, you may or may not know it, but here's what is happening, and it's negatively impacting the team, is often all it takes. They're just not aware.
Even if they are aware, Denise, I'm just sitting here thinking the times when imposter syndrome, I've let it go too far in my life, and it has negatively impacted my relationships with others. I think it's very much a gift that you're seeing this in your supervisor right now. Whatever the situation may be, Denise is absolutely right that if you can have a conversation, but at a minimum, remember this case and learn from it, right? Try and limit the influence of imposter syndrome in your own life and how it might impact your relationships with others. Because the reality is if we feel like an imposter, we're not going to be able to give people, those attagirls or attaboys. We're going to be so concerned about propping ourselves up that we forget to help do exactly what Denise was talking about in terms of lifting someone else's spirit that day, which is really where some of the most meaningful moments have come in my life.
Well, we're right at the top of the hour, so we want to thank all of you who have participated and shared this time with us. Hopefully you've gotten some great tools, that you have a better understanding of what imposter syndrome is. And again, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to Joel or I, and we're happy to answer any other questions that you have. Time goes by fast, but thank you very much. Joel, thanks. It's been great to work with you.
Been a lot of fun, Denise. Thank you. And thanks everyone for attending.